What I've got right here is the latest and greatest full frame camera from Sony. This is the highly anticipated, long awaited Sony A7V. I was genuinely excited for the release of this camera, and when the specs dropped, I honestly thought this is the upgrade I've been waiting for. So without any hesitation whatsoever, I pre-ordered it, but soon after, the A7V started to get hit with backlash, mainly from bitter keyboard warriors and even some camera influencers who seem to be more focused on what this camera doesn't do rather than the major upgrades it does. And after the last month of owning it, I've put this camera through its paces. I've taken it to London to shoot cityscape and street photography, both during the day and at night. I've tested it at a wildlife park, and I even brought it to a car event. And from shooting with this camera in multiple different environments, focusing on different kind of subjects, I feel like I can now bring you my honest thoughts and genuine hands-on experience using this camera. And by the end of this video, I guarantee you'll know whether the Sony A7V is a great first full-frame camera, a worthwhile upgrade from the A7 IV, A7 III, or even the A6700. So, let's get into it. When it comes to build quality and handling, if you squint hard enough, you might be able to tell that Sony has made some subtle changes. The grip, for starters, has been tweaked slightly. The slope feels more secure and planted in the hand, especially when you're using bigger or heavier lenses. It's not a huge difference compared to the A7 IV, but it feels nice. When you flip the camera around though, you will notice the all-new 4-axis screen, or as I like to call it, the Ninja Chop screen. It whacks, it flaps, and it slaps in just about every direction. It's been around on other Sony cameras for a while, and it's nice to see it make its way here too. The LCD screen itself has also seen a nice upgrade from 1.04 million dots to 2.9 million dots, which is definitely a noticeable jump in sharpness. It makes composing, reviewing, and monitoring shots much easier, more precise, and just more lovelier. Although it's not all sunshine and rainbows, the EVF hasn't been upgraded. It's still the same 3.69 million dot panel from the A7 IV. It's decent enough, but from what I've heard, it's now on the lower end compared to what Nikon and Canon are offering in their full frame cameras. On a brighter note, a small but definitely welcome upgrade is that the UI now automatically rotates from when you're shooting in landscape to portrait, which makes shooting vertically much more intuitive. The A7V has 2 memory card slots. Unlike the A7 IV, one slot supports CF Express Type A or SD cards, while the other is dedicated to SD cards only. The A7V is ever so slightly heavier than its predecessor, the A7 IV, but the difference is subtle to say the least. The A7 IV weighing 659 grams, and this new camera weighs 695 grams. Another upgrade is you now get 2 USB-C ports. One fast 10GB port for transfer and tethering, and then a second port for powering your accessories. Other than that, the body hasn't changed at all. It's the classic Sony design that we've come to know and love, just a bit more refined. Most of Sony's real focus with the A7V has been internally, and this is where, in my opinion, things get really exciting. Now, it might be the same resolution found in the A7 IV and A7C Mark II, but don't let that fool you. It is an all-new sensor. The A7V packs a brand new 33 megapixel partially stacked sensor, and it's paired with the all-new Bion Z XR2 processor. And just those 2 upgrades alone change almost everything about this camera's performance. In nerd language, that basically means the sensor reads data much faster, and it also reduces things like rolling shutter, which was honestly atrocious on the A7 IV, and for that reason alone, I never used the electronic shutter on that camera, and that also applies to the A7C Mark II I'm currently filming on. So on the A7V, the readout speed has dropped to 12 milliseconds, 4.5 times faster than the A7 IVs and the A7Cs Mark II, 67 milliseconds. That raw speed also unlocks a headline feature. blackout free 30 frames per second continuous shooting. That's the same speed found on the A1 Mark II, which makes the A7V feel like a baby brother to Sony's flagship camera at roughly half the price. That's wild. And along with all that raw speed, Sony decided to slap in another flagship feature: pre-capture. For those unfamiliar, pre-capture works by basically taking photographs in the background, and it is activated when you half press the shutter or another assigned button, and then when you decide to fully press the shutter, it would have captured the buffer frames from before and the ones from afterwards. So say for example you were taking a photograph of a bird diving off the edge of a cliff and you missed the moment it left and leaped, the camera would have captured those buffer frames in the background, and it can be set from anywhere between 0.03 seconds to 1 whole second. It's an absolute game changer for anybody shooting fast moving action, and when you pair that with the 30 frames per second blackout continuous shooting, it becomes nearly impossible to miss a shot. I got to test both of these features out at the wildlife park, and I couldn't believe the sheer speed coming from this camera. The burst rate is insane, and the pre-capture feature meant that even if I reacted a split second too late, the camera still nailed the shot for me. So if you're the type of photographer who finds himself shooting a lot of wildlife, sports or motorsports photography, these two features alone might sell you on the A7V. Anybody who had just bought the Alpha Mark II must feel pretty foolish right now. It's also worth noting that when you are shooting in compressed RAW, the camera's buffer, from what I've read, can handle around 95 shots, meaning in just 3 seconds you can fire off nearly 95 RAW files before the buffer starts to fill, which is seriously impressive for this class of camera. Do bear in mind that's only with the electronic shutter. If you're going to switch to the mechanical shutter, you are limited to 10 frames per second, which does mean you're actually never going to outrun the buffer. So I definitely say that this camera is built around the intention of being used in that electronic shutter mode, especially in fast-paced environments. So how's support for third-party lenses? There were some reports from people like Kai who said that focus with third-party lenses didn't work that efficiently, or sometimes not at all. I'm going to speculate that that might have been a firmware issue, because from my experience so far, I've had no problems whatsoever with third-party glass. I've used lenses like the Sigma 60-600, Sigma 24-70 f2.8 Mark II, the Sigma 85mm f1.4, and the Sigma 35mm f1.4 with no problems whatsoever. I also tried some third-party glass from Viltrox, and whilst the autofocus wasn't as fast, I would say that has more to do with the lenses themselves rather than the camera. So from my experience, third-party support is solid, but I will attach an asterisk to that. That said, third-party lenses are not supported with the 30 frames per second blackout continuous shooting, which is a bit of a shame because I use a lot of third-party lenses, and I'm sure a lot of you guys do too. I can't always justify the price tag of a G-Master lens. It's often way too rich for my blood, and I would prefer to get a third-party lens at around half the price, but comparable if not better quality. So yeah, that's just something to bear in mind, but the good news is, at least from my testing, is you can still achieve 15 frames per second blackout free shooting. So that's something at least. Battery life on the A7V has seen a 25% increase while still using the same MPFZ100 battery. This has been achieved by combining the Bion XR processor with the AI chip, and I can confirm I have actually noticed a difference in battery life. When I was shooting down in London, I went through on a full day of shooting one full battery, and the other one only used 20% of battery by the time I'd finished. Bear in mind I was shooting both photo and video, so your mileage may vary, but there is definitely a noticeable improvement there. So as mentioned, the A7V now features an AI processor which can recognize a wide range of subjects, including humans, animals, birds, insects, cars, trains and aeroplanes. It's not a brand new feature, it's been around the block for a while and on many different Sony cameras, including the A6700, but hey, it's a welcome and much needed add-on. Sony has also added a new auto subject recognition target that automatically switches between different subjects. In most situations it works quite well, but I have noticed in some scenarios it does get a little tangled and confused on what subject it should be prioritizing. So for example here, I'm trying to take a photograph of the Ghostbusters car. Who are you gonna call? Well, not the autofocus, because it seems way too adamant and persistent that the focus should be on the people around it rather than the car itself, even though it takes up a large portion of the frame. In these kind of scenarios, I found it's best just to switch to the dedicated subject recognition target so the focus stays exactly where you want it and doesn't wander. The image quality on the A7V has also gotten a little bit better. The dynamic range is now rated at 16 stops, one full stop more than its predecessor. This means the camera can capture more detail in both the shadows and the highlights, giving you more flexibility when shooting in high contrast scenes or editing in post. The ISO range has also been bumped up to 204,800. That is a lot of ISO, and I don't think any of us will ever need to venture into those kind of high numbers. The highest ISO that I've used so far on this camera is 12,800. And that was at the wildlife park on a very typical British grey day. And because I was shooting wildlife, I also had to use a faster shutter speed. I was also using a variable aperture lens, which meant I had to bump up the ISO to get my shots exposed correctly in camera. But this did present the perfect opportunity to see how this camera handles higher ISO, and I'd like to walk through a few of these shots with you. First up, we've got this shot of a beautiful tiger shot at ISO 3200. Zoomed in at 100%, there's hardly any grain. It's so clean, the eye is tap sharp, and this is perfect. Next, we have a couple of lion cubs, one of which is trying to steal the food from the other by biting its bum. This was shot at ISO 6400. Zoomed out, it looks fantastic, and zoomed in at 100%, you can see a little bit more grain, but it's beyond passable. Then we have two seals having a barking match at each other. Is it a barking match? I'm not David Attenborough, I have no clue. Anyway, it's shot at ISO 8000, and it looks great at a normal view. And even zoomed in, while there's some noise, it's still very usable. You can even push up to 200% and the detail still holds up with no noticeable color noise. And finally, here's a self-portrait of me at ISO 12,800, the maximum I'd realistically use on this camera. On the surface, the detail is still impressive. Zoomed in to 100%, you do notice the noise a lot more, but it's still passable again. And with Lightroom denoise applied, the image cleans up beautifully, preserving the details, and it looks like an all-new image. And that's something to bear in mind. If you do find yourself in a situation where you have to push the ISO, the A7V is going to handle that flawlessly. But if you do want to clean up the image later in post, utilize tools like Lightroom denoise to make the image look brand spanking new. When it comes to ISO performance for video, this camera does have a bit of a trick up its sleeve. It has an unconfirmed dual native ISO. Now this is the same as on the A7 IV, but the difference is the second base on the A7 IV was at 3200, whilst on the A7 V it seems to be at 8000. So take a look at this clip shot ISO 6400. You can see quite a bit of noise here in the sky and in the corners. Now when I switch it to ISO 8000, much of that noise is gone, it's cleaned up. Having this on a mid-range hybrid camera is a seriously impressive tool, and one I wasn't anticipating. Another significant upgrade is the in-body stabilization, which is now rated in the center at 7.5 stops and in the corners 6.5 stops. And I'm not going to pretend I fully understand how that works on a technical level, but what I do know, it's a noticeable improvement over the A7 IV, which was rated at 5.5 stops. I've been able to utilize this new IBIS system and shoot photography at some ridiculously low shutter speeds, with the results still coming out tack sharp. I mean, just look at this shot at 1/4 of a second, and when you zoom in, you can see how sharp it is, and this was all shot handheld. Speaking of video, you might be wondering, well, what's new there? And let me tell you, or actually, let Curtis from 8th of November 2024 give you the rundown. It's time now for my crazy theory time about the A6700. I don't have a tinfoiled hat, unfortunately. This North Face will have to do. So here's my crazy theory. I believe that when the Sony A7V comes out, it will basically be a full-frame version of the A6700. Right, just imagine that for a second, right? 4K up to 60 FPS with no crop, and then 4K 120 with a crop. Throw into the mix a high-end sensor for stills, AI autofocus, and you have possibly one of the best hybrid cameras on the market. What did I tell you? See, I wasn't an absolute crazed maniac with that theory. I didn't need that tinfoil hat. I was right all along. Now, I don't want to say I'm psychic, but in that moment, I definitely was. So yes, this camera shoots 4K up to 60 frames per second without a crop. Finally, Sony, it only took you 5 years. It is also oversampled from 7K without any binning. Now, to ensure that you shoot full width 60p and 100p, you want to ensure that this one setting is turned on, and that is the 4K angle of view priority. This setting will give you full frame at 60p, and if you don't have it on, you'll have a slight crop with noise reduction enabled. So that's just something to bear in mind. This camera also comes fully equipped with 422 10-bit recording across the board, giving you all the flexibility you could ever need to push and pull your footage in post and really nail your stylized look. For that reason, I'm always shooting an S-Log3 since it gives me the maximum amount of flexibility when grading. We also finally get 4K 120 frames per second. But yes, it does come with a 1.5 times crop. I fully anticipated that. Actually, I predicted it, and I'm not letting that go. It's also worth mentioning that you can shoot 1080 at 240 FPS in the S and Q modes, which is pretty nice to have. So now let's talk about the cons of the A7V, and there is an elephant in the room here. Actually, there's multiple, and I don't know how we fit them all in here. 4K 120 FPS is cropped. There is no raw recording, and there is no open gate, and that last one is the one that seems to be setting the camera forums ablaze. So let's talk about that one first. Honestly, I don't really care about it, and I don't need it for what I personally shoot. And I think the people who've been complaining the loudest about it will end up never using that feature if they had it in the first place. Now, I'm not defending Sony. I may shoot with their cameras, but I have no affiliations with them whatsoever, so no reason to defend them. That said, I do understand the argument for why Open Gate is useful and why it maybe should have been included on the A7V. Now, a throwback to when I used to work as a full-time videographer, I'd work on projects with my boss, Dave. And before any project started, I would ask Dave, does this need to be cropped for vertical as well, or is it just landscape? And on one of the earliest projects I ever worked on with him, he went, just landscape, don't worry, I don't know why he's got an accent, just landscape, Curtis, that is what the client has asked for. So I would make sure everything was nicely framed in landscape, and I would leave no wiggle room for vertical whatsoever. And you could probably see where this is going. I'd later be editing the project, and then the client would call and say, actually, can we have that in vertical as well? My boss would say, yeah, no problem. Curtis, we need that to be in vertical as well. And I'd look at the footage, knowing that I left no wiggle room, sink into my desk, do a deep breath and be like, okay then. And I remember those days vividly, and yeah, we had to go and basically say to the client, we can't do that. And it was from that day, I always made sure, no matter the project we worked on, even if Dave was 100% adamant that it was just going to be for landscape, I'd always give myself a bit more wiggle room to turn it from landscape to vertical if I needed to. Now, those are very specific scenarios for where Open Gate might have been helpful. But again, it might not have actually saved my bacon because of how tightly I had framed up my shot. You still need to understand how to frame your shot if you're shooting landscape and later want to turn it into portrait. So I understand why it's a helpful tool, but you got to ask yourself, if you've never needed it now, will you need it in the future? So I do get it, but saying the A7V is useless and a write-off because it doesn't have open gate is so redundant. It's a feature not everybody needs, and I think only a minority of people probably do need it. It's honestly just the latest buzzword in camera features. The same logic applies to RAW video. Even if the A7V had it, I probably wouldn't use it because the file sizes can be massive, the storage costs are going to add up, and the hardware needed to be able to run it smoothly can get seriously expensive. I know a couple of people who shoot wedding videos and they shoot on Canon, and they have the option of using RAW video, but they choose not to because it slows down turnaround time and adds a lot of unnecessary hassle for most jobs. I also think most people bitching about this are just too obsessed with the specs. Now, I know that is rich from me. I do a lot of camera reviews, I'm a tech nerd, I love this kind of stuff. But I also understand the specs of any camera will only take you so far. Your creativity and technical understanding is what is going to make the most significant difference. Not to toot my own horn here, but the reason that I know I can take fantastic photos with any camera is because I know how to use the tools given to me from years of practice. 4K 120 is the one area where I do understand the criticism. Sony could have easily avoided putting in a 1.5 times crop. They haven't got a crop on the A7S III, and they don't have one on the ZV-E1. That said, I don't personally mind it. I rarely shoot at 4K 120, and on the occasions that I do, most likelihood is I'm focusing on a very specific area of the frame because I plan to slow it down later in post, and I want to draw attention to the action happening. So in those scenarios, actually having that extra reach can be useful rather than a downside. At the end of the day, every camera system these days is incredible. Nikon, Canon, Sony, they all give us tools that only a few years ago we could have dreamed of. I remember when I started shooting with Sony and I thought to myself, one day I hope I can have specs like this in a camera. And now I've got it with the A7V. This is everything I could ever hope for and more. So as you can probably tell, I'm genuinely happy with the A7V. Now anybody who is familiar with the channel will know that I don't just buy gear willy-nilly. I invest into the cameras that I use, and it's a long-term decision, something that I'll grow into and use for years. Yes, the A7V doesn't have every single buzzword feature under the sun, but it is a monster of a camera, and for photographers and videographers, it will serve you extremely well. If you're a hybrid shooter, a content creator, a wildlife photographer, or a sports photographer, then this camera was designed with you in mind. So would I recommend the Sony A7V? Absolutely. Of course, whether it's the right upgrade for you depends on where you're coming from. If you're upgrading from the likes of the A7 III, in my opinion, it's a no-brainer. Everything is improved and you're going to notice a significant difference immediately. Coming from the A7 IV, it can be a tougher sell, especially if you're looking at buying your first full frame camera, considering it's going to be a lot cheaper, but what sold me was the 4K 60 uncropped and the AI autofocus. If you don't need those features, honestly, you might be better off staying with the A7 IV, and maybe if you need to, investing that money you would have spent upgrading on a new lens. And finally, my friends using the A6700, I would recommend that you stick with the A6700. I wouldn't rush going to full frame because it's a lot more expensive, not just for the camera, but also the lenses that go with it. Moving forward, the two cameras that I'm going to be using mostly here on the channel are going to be the A7V and the A6700, because the A6700 actually handles some situations and scenarios better than the A7V. And I will be actually covering the differences between the A6700 and the A7V in a future video, so subscribe and stay tuned if you don't want to miss that. That said, if you are ready to step into full frame and you need a Sony hybrid full frame camera that is going to tick all the right boxes, then the A7V is it. For me, the Sony A7V is the perfect hybrid full frame camera, and that is something I don't say lightly, and I've never said that about any full frame camera previously. This camera, it's capable, it's fast, and it is versatile. This is a camera that will serve hybrid shooters and content creators extremely well for years to come. If you have any questions, opinions, or rants, leave them in the comment section below. I love reading them, and if you do leave a question, I will try and get back to it as soon as possible. And if you did like today's video, do hit the like button, it really does help out. And subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and if you want to see my face again, we are making our way to 100k subscribers, so any additional support would be really deeply appreciated, and it would be great to have you a part of this ever so growing community. So just before you head out today, if you would like to see how I've set up the A7V for both photography and filmmaking, then check out this top video right here. Alternatively, if you'd like to see a street POV down in London with the A7V, then check out this bottom video right here.